The ballroom was full of champagne, music, and people pretending not to stare. Then Lauren lifted her glass and pointed toward the man sitting alone near the back.
Everyone, this is Michael, my ex-husband.
Several guests turned. Lauren smiled.
He's the man I finally had the courage to leave.
Congratulations, Lauren.
You should be happy for me.
I am.
Then raise your glass.
Michael slowly
To Lauren and
lifted
Scott,
his glass.
I genuinely wish you both happiness.
The room
Thank you,
applauded.
Michael. And honestly, you
But
should
Lauren
be proud.
wasn't
You
finished.
finally let me go.
I did.
Lauren smiled and walked away. She had no idea that, before the night was over, the CEO of one of the largest healthcare companies in the region would walk across that ballroom, stop beside Michael, and shake his hand. And what he was about to say would change everything. To understand how they reached that moment, we have to go back 3 years. Michael and Lauren had been married for 12 years. They lived outside Charlotte, North Carolina, in a comfortable 3-bedroom home they had worked hard to afford. They weren't wealthy. But they weren't struggling either. Michael worked in commercial construction management. He was dependable, practical, and careful with money. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to impress people. He believed that if you worked hard, kept your word, and took care of your family, you were doing something meaningful. For years, Lauren believed the same thing. Or at least, Michael thought she did. They had built their life slowly. There had been ordinary birthdays, quiet Christmas mornings, weekend trips, arguments about bills, and evenings when they sat together at the kitchen table planning their future. Michael believed those ordinary moments were what made a marriage strong. But Lauren eventually began seeing ordinary very differently. She started noticing what other people had. The expensive cars. The designer clothes. The luxury vacations. The larger houses. The business dinners. And slowly, the life she had once been proud of began to look small to her. Michael noticed the change gradually. Lauren started coming home later. She became less interested in their conversations. She spent more time on her phone. And when Michael asked how her day had been, her answers became shorter. He didn't immediately suspect another man. He suspected stress. Maybe work. Maybe boredom. Maybe something he could fix. That was Michael's first mistake. He thought the problem was something he could repair. Then Scott Reynolds entered the picture. Scott was a successful real estate developer who had begun working with Lauren professionally. He was wealthy, confident, well-connected, and accustomed to getting what he wanted. At first, Lauren mentioned him casually. Then she started mentioning him often. Michael would hear about Scott's latest project. Scott's new property. Scott's business connections. Scott's expensive dinners. Eventually, Michael noticed something else. Lauren started dressing differently whenever she knew she was meeting Scott. She bought new clothes. Changed her hairstyle. Started spending more time getting ready. Michael noticed. But he still trusted his wife. Narrator. Then one evening, Lauren came home almost 2 hours late. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table. Dinner was already cold. He looked up. Lauren walked past him without saying much. Michael watched her put down her purse. Something about her expression bothered him. She wasn't exhausted. She looked happy. Excited, even. That night, Michael barely slept. The following week, the late meetings continued. Then came the restaurant receipts. One evening, Michael saw a charge for nearly $400 at an expensive restaurant. He asked about it. Lauren said it had been a business dinner. Michael accepted the explanation. He wanted to. Then one night, while Lauren was asleep, her phone lit up on the nightstand. Michael wasn't searching through it. He wasn't trying to invade her privacy. But he saw the name. Scott. And beneath it was a message. I can't stop thinking about tonight. Michael stared at the screen. He didn't touch the phone. He didn't open the message. He simply stood there in the darkness, feeling something inside him collapse. Because suddenly, all the little things made sense. The late meetings. The expensive dinners. The new clothes. The distance. The excuses. The next morning, Michael went to work. He performed his job. He answered emails. He attended meetings. He shook hands. He smiled when necessary. But his mind wasn't there. For several days, he tried to convince himself there was another explanation. Maybe the message meant nothing. Maybe Scott was being inappropriate and Lauren had rejected him. Maybe Michael was imagining the worst. But deep down, he already knew. A few weeks later, Michael finally confronted the truth. Lauren told him she didn't love him anymore. She said she was tired of their ordinary life. She said she felt like she was settling. And when Michael asked whether there was another man, she avoided looking directly at him. She didn't need to say Scott's name. Michael already knew. What hurt most wasn't simply that she wanted a divorce. It was the realization that she had already emotionally left while he was still trying to save the marriage. 3 weeks later, Lauren moved into Scott's luxury condo. Michael stayed behind in their house. The silence was brutal. For 12 years, he had heard Lauren moving around upstairs. He had heard her laugh from another room. He had heard the front door open when she came home. Now there was nothing. Just silence. The divorce was finalized months later. Michael could have fought Lauren over everything. He could have made the process ugly. He could have tried to punish her. Instead, he gave her the larger portion of their savings and walked away. Friends told him he was being too generous. But Michael wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted his life back. The first year after the divorce was difficult. Michael moved into a smaller apartment. He worked. He came home. He ate alone. He slept alone. And some nights, he wondered whether he had failed as a husband. But eventually, he stopped asking what he had done wrong. He started asking what he wanted to become. That question changed his life. Michael had spent years working in commercial construction management. He understood budgets, contracts, scheduling, risk. He understood how small mistakes could become millions of dollars in losses. So he decided to start a consulting company. It was small. At first, he had only a few clients. His office was modest. His staff was tiny. There were months when he wasn't sure whether the company would survive. But Michael kept going. He wasn't trying to prove anything to Lauren. He was trying to prove something to himself. That he could rebuild. Then came a major healthcare construction project. The company overseeing it was already millions of dollars over budget. Michael was hired to audit the project. He expected to find mistakes. Instead, he uncovered something much bigger. Inflated invoices. Poorly negotiated contracts. Unnecessary expenses. Financial decisions that could have cost the company millions more. Michael spent weeks reviewing documents. He stayed late. He checked numbers again and again. Finally, he submitted his report. The result was extraordinary. His recommendations could save the company nearly $18 million. The report moved through the company's executive team. Eventually, it reached the desk of Richard Bennett, the company's CEO. Richard was a respected businessman in his early 60s. He had built Bennett Health Systems into a major healthcare company. Richard didn't know Michael personally. But he remembered his work. He remembered the report. And he remembered the man whose analysis had protected his company from an enormous financial loss. Michael had no idea. He simply returned to work. Over the next year, his consulting company grew. The clients became larger. The contracts became more valuable. Michael hired employees. He moved into a better home. His financial situation improved dramatically. But he didn't become arrogant. He didn't suddenly start showing off. He remained the same quiet man who believed that good work spoke louder than appearances. Meanwhile, Lauren's life with Scott looked perfect. At least from the outside. They attended expensive events. They traveled. They took photographs beside luxury cars. Lauren seemed determined to show everyone that she had made the right decision. Michael occasionally heard about them through mutual friends. He never asked questions. He never checked Lauren's social media. He didn't care anymore. Or at least, he thought he didn't. Then, 2 years after the divorce, the invitation arrived. Lauren was getting married. To Scott. Michael stared at the envelope for a long time. He almost threw it away. Then he opened it. The wedding was going to be held at one of Charlotte's most expensive hotels. Hundreds of guests were expected. Business executives. Friends. Family members. People from Scott's world. And Lauren wanted Michael there. Beneath his name was a handwritten note. I hope you'll come. I want you to see how happy I am now. Michael read it twice. For a moment, the old wound returned. He remembered Lauren leaving. He remembered the divorce. He remembered sitting alone in that empty house. And he remembered Scott. The man who had everything Michael once believed he had lost. But something was different now. Michael wasn't the same man Lauren had left behind. He had built a company. He had rebuilt his confidence. He had learned to live without her. And he had stopped measuring his worth by the life she chose. So he decided to attend. Not because he wanted Lauren back. Not because he wanted revenge. And not because he wanted to compete with Scott. He went because he wanted to prove something to himself. That he could stand in the same room with the woman who had broken his heart. And feel nothing but peace. On the afternoon of the wedding, Michael stood in front of his bedroom mirror wearing a dark suit. He adjusted his tie. For a moment, he thought about staying home. Then he shook his head. He picked up his keys. Across town, Lauren was preparing for the wedding of her dreams. Her dress had been carefully chosen. The ballroom had been decorated with white flowers and crystal chandeliers. Champagne was already being poured. Scott had invited several powerful business contacts. Lauren had spent months planning every detail. And she knew Michael was coming. She had even imagined the moment he would walk into the room. In her mind, he would look uncomfortable. Maybe bitter. Maybe jealous. She wanted him to see what she believed he had lost. Michael arrived at the hotel just before the reception. The ballroom was magnificent. Hundreds of guests moved between tables. Waiters carried champagne. Soft music played beneath the conversations. Michael entered quietly. Nobody announced him. Nobody knew what was about to happen. He found a seat near the back of the room. From there, he could see Lauren and Scott. They looked happy. Scott was laughing with several wealthy guests. Lauren was surrounded by friends. Then Lauren turned. Her eyes found Michael. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Lauren smiled. It wasn't the warm smile of someone seeing an old friend. It was the smile of someone who believed she had one. Michael simply nodded. Then he sat back. He had come prepared to watch his past celebrate without him. What he hadn't prepared for was the way Lauren planned to make sure everyone knew exactly why she had left him. And before the night was over, Michael would be humiliated in front of hundreds of people. But Lauren had made one enormous mistake. She thought the man sitting quietly at the back of her wedding was still the same man she had abandoned 3 years earlier. She had no idea who was about to walk into that ballroom. And she certainly had no idea that the person who would change Michael's life forever was already on his way. Lauren lifted the microphone. The ballroom fell silent. She looked directly at Michael and began talking about their 12-year marriage, carefully choosing words that made her sound grateful while quietly making him look like the man she had outgrown. She spoke about how she had once believed loyalty was enough. How she had eventually realized that being comfortable was not the same as being happy. Then she turned toward Scott and made it clear that meeting him had shown her what success really looked like. Several guests laughed awkwardly. Michael sat perfectly still. The humiliation was deliberate. Lauren wasn't simply celebrating her new marriage. She was making sure Michael understood that she believed she had traded up. Finally, she raised her glass and thanked Michael for letting her go. For a moment, the entire room waited for his reaction. Michael simply stood, raised his glass, and wished Lauren and Scott happiness. Then he sat down. That was when the ballroom doors opened. A distinguished man in his early 60s entered with 2 executives. Several guests immediately recognized him. Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Health Systems. Scott noticed him almost immediately. For months, Scott had been trying to secure a major construction contract from Richard's company, and the Raleigh expansion represented one of the biggest opportunities his business had ever pursued. Scott started toward him. But Richard wasn't looking for Scott. His attention had already moved across the ballroom. Then he saw Michael. Richard stopped. He changed direction and walked straight toward the man sitting quietly near the back. The conversations around the room gradually disappeared as people realized something unusual was happening. Richard reached Michael and extended his hand. The 2 men shook hands. And suddenly, everyone who had been watching Lauren humiliate her ex-husband was watching the CEO of Bennett Health Systems treat that same man like someone important. Richard had been trying to meet Michael personally because of the construction audit that had saved his company nearly $18 million. Michael's report had uncovered inflated invoices, unnecessary expenses, and serious contractual problems that could have cost the company millions more. But Richard wasn't there simply to thank him. He had reviewed Michael's proposal for the company's upcoming Raleigh expansion. He wanted Michael's consulting firm to oversee the project. The announcement changed the atmosphere immediately. Scott's expression collapsed. The Raleigh contract was the very opportunity he had spent months pursuing. Now the CEO was offering it to Michael. The man Lauren had just publicly presented as someone she had outgrown. Lauren watched in disbelief. Only minutes earlier, she had been standing before hundreds of people explaining why she had chosen Scott instead of Michael. Now she was watching the same Michael receive an opportunity that could transform his company. And the most painful part for her was that Michael didn't look surprised by his own worth. He didn't look desperate to prove anything. He didn't celebrate her embarrassment. He didn't even turn toward her. He simply accepted the opportunity with the same quiet confidence he had carried into the room. Scott's business relationship with Richard immediately became uncertain. The Raleigh project was no longer guaranteed to his company. And once Richard's team began examining the situation more closely, questions started emerging about Scott's previous business dealings. Investors became nervous. Partners began reconsidering their relationships with him. The reputation that Scott had spent years building began to weaken. Michael, meanwhile, walked out of the wedding before the night was over. He didn't wait around to watch Scott panic. He didn't stay to see whether Lauren would regret what she had done. He simply stepped outside into the Charlotte night and stood beside his car. For years, he had imagined what it would feel like to prove Lauren wrong. But standing there, he realized something unexpected. He didn't need to. He had already moved on. The following Monday, Michael's firm officially took over the Raleigh expansion. The contract brought new clients, new opportunities, and a level of credibility his company had never experienced before. Scott's company lost the project. As more questions surfaced around his business practices, his professional reputation continued to deteriorate. The life Lauren had believed she was marrying into became increasingly unstable. Meanwhile, Michael kept building. He expanded his company. He hired more people. He took on larger projects. But he never became obsessed with what happened to Scott. He had learned that revenge could keep a person emotionally tied to the very people they were trying to escape. Michael wanted something better. Freedom. Months later, Lauren contacted him. She wasn't calling to celebrate his success. She needed a favor. For a moment, Michael was reminded of the woman he had once loved. The woman he had shared 12 years of his life with. But the memories no longer controlled him. He listened to her request. Then he made it clear that he had no hatred toward her, but he had no intention of returning to the life they once shared. That conversation finally closed the last door between them. Years later, Michael would remember that wedding differently. He wouldn't remember it as the night his ex-wife humiliated him. He would remember it as the night he realized he had nothing left to prove. Lauren had invited him because she wanted him to see what he had lost. Instead, she unknowingly showed him how far he had come. She thought she was celebrating the man she had chosen. But by the end of the night, everyone in that ballroom understood something she had failed to see. Michael wasn't the man who had been left behind. He was the man who had rebuilt his life after being left behind. And that became the greatest lesson of his story. Sometimes betrayal feels like the end because we only see what was taken from us. The marriage. The trust. The home. The years. The future we thought we were going to have. But sometimes, what feels like the end is simply the moment we are finally forced to build a life that belongs completely to us. Michael didn't become successful because Lauren left him. He became successful because he refused to let her decision define the rest of his life. And perhaps that was the most satisfying part of all. Lauren had spent one evening trying to make Michael feel small. But she couldn't. Because by then, Michael had already discovered something she could never take away from him. His worth. Sometimes, the person who betrays you thinks they're taking your future with them. They're not. Your future is still yours. And sometimes, the person they were so proud to leave behind becomes the person they wish they had never underestimated. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought you would never recover, subscribe to Tales of Betrayers. Because sometimes, the best ending isn't revenge. It's getting your life back.